Hello, Lee, everyone. Welcome once again to the Chillaxing and Chit Chatting podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Miguel Whittle, also known as Time Agent MW. And I thought I'd go ahead and do another episode of the podcast. Now I've got more free time. Hope everyone's had a nice Christmas and a happy New Year. So for this episode of the podcast, there's various things I want to talk about. Of course, I've got some big finish reviews to talk about. One in particular that's a bit special. But I wanted to also talk about, I suppose, just my letterbox that in terms of my New Year's resolutions. One of my resolutions for the New Year's to update my letterbox more often. So I'm planning to go ahead and make sure that I keep it, updated each time round. And I thought I'd go ahead and probably share around as well. Basically, just see if I can sort this out. Oh, that's my let's see. Here we are. So I'm sharing this. Hopefully this should work through. So hopefully this should work. So if I go to my letterbox, so as I said, I'm planning to do more reviews on my letterbox. Keep updated. Unlike before, where I did reviews sometimes I didn't. So there's a couple of reviews I've got up here. You'll notice that I've done a review for Oppenheimer, which I did do. Um, which I did do a review for Oppenheimer about last year, early last year as well. So, but the reason I'm doing the review for Oppenheimer, I'm just going to share it again, just to make sure it's all good. Um, is to go ahead and is take is the reason I did another review for it again was I wanted to rewatch it and to also get back to my reviews of Christopher Nolan because I'm planning to watch all of his films. So yeah, there's a so in terms of my review, the rating was still the same, but it was a treat to see it anyways. I was happy to see it again. Um, the reason I was happy to see it again was because, it's still a really well crafted film, I think, in terms of it winning Best Picture. I think the technical aspects behind it was all really quite something in terms of it's special in terms of the not just cinematography, the technical aspects like the use of lighting around in some scenes and also the costumes and production and everything. It's all really quite terrific to look into. I also did a review of the Batman, which I hadn't seen since cinema, but I really enjoyed that. And I'm currently watching the Penguin TV series. Haven't watched it all the way through, but so far I'm about two episodes in, and that's been pretty solid as well. And in terms of this film, The Batman, it was really cool actually seeing it with my telly because I've got the ambient light. So some of the scenes were really cool to see with the lights. And overall, I think in terms of a film, it is a long film, but it's a film that I think has a really nice pacing to it. And I know there's been talks about the delay for the Batman, part two specifically, in terms of the delay behind that. But I don't know. I think personally, I think I'm happy to have it being delayed if it means then there's enough time for Matt Reeves and the production team and everyone to craft a really good sequel that lives up to what the original had. Another review I did actually was a film that I watched back in November, early November, with a friend of mine, Louis, and it was The Wild Robot, which it was just me and him seeing it, and that to me was one of I don't know if I have a favorite film of 2024, but maybe because of recency, but even then, this still would be one of my favorites from 2024. Recency might have helped a bit, but I personally found it to be a really good film, and I mentioned in my review that one of the things about The Wild Robot is that it's a film that, for me, anyways, was one that I found more emotional attachment to than, say, Inside Out 2, which I'm a Pixar fan, but I thought Inside Out 2 was solid and fine, but I didn't think it was not as good as the original, and personally, I didn't absolutely love it, but I enjoyed it. But for me, The Wild Robot was my personal favorite animated feature film. I wasn't too sure if it would be my absolute favorite because of Wallace and Gromit also coming out this year. But I don't think it was as good as Wild Robot, but I do think it was a solid feature film in terms of, and it was a very like short feature film. It isn't very long anyways, but the pacing did make it feel very quick. And actually, I was eating cheese and crackers. I was drinking from a mug I bought, a mug I got actually my for Christmas, my sort of gift. It was this little grommet mug, which lights up its nose whenever you heat some water in it or if you're making tea, which is really nice. I also wore this shirt, which I got from not this Christmas of 2024, but Christmas of 2023. And it was a very fitting shirt to wear because not only is it Wallace and Gromit, don't know if you can see anything on there, to be fair. Oh, other way around. There we are. So I don't know. So like, it's not only got Wallace and Gromit on there, but you can see Feathers McGraw on there as well, who of course returns in the sequel. And the one thing they have kept consistent is Feathers himself. He's great in the sequel, and overall, it also is a pretty solid sequel. I don't know if it's as good as say Curse the Were Rabbit, which was the other feature film from Wallace and Gromit, but it was still pretty good. I thought it was nice as a sequel, as a new Wallace and Gromit feature film, and I think it's one that is pleasing most people because I think it's one that I think can really, it's one that I don't think will take off anyone really. But I saw during like the last two films I really saw last year were the two Sonic the Hedgehog films, which I saw the first one, most of it anyways, before, but I hadn't seen it all the way through until like this time around 30th of December. So it was overall, I actually had a good time with it. It's 3.5 because I just thought it's solid. It doesn't have anything like amazing or stand out, but it was really solid, I thought, watching it actually this time round. And I also thought that the sequel, even though it's got the same rating, was probably better than the original. It has the issue only of like the human characters are focused a little bit, and that perhaps logs it down a bit. But for me, anyways, I think it was a film that was really solid. And also, I know people talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which I am going to watch tomorrow. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I know had a really good third act. I think with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the third act in this film was really, really good, where you have Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and then Dr. Eggman and everything, and it's all really, really well made. I thought the third act was really solid. And then I think I watched in the 2nd of January was a film called Yojimbo, which was a my first exposure to Akira Kurosawa. And I bought actually this was from last year. I bought this at the same time at HM. I bought this on HMV online, and it was the same time I bought the um the Doctor Who season 22 Blu-ray box set. Um, and this was a collection of Akira Kurosawa samurai films. I know Criterion has a lot of his films, but I think the BFI is the in the UK anyways is the company that is preserving a lot of his films. I know High and Low is recently come out on Blu-ray, and a couple other films from Kurosawa as well came out on Blu-ray from the BFI, which is really good. The restoration was I thought really solid, and I chose Yojimbo because I thought I had actually seen the remake, the unofficial remake of that film, which was A Fistful of Dollars, starring Clint Eastwood. But I also saw but also I just thought it was a film that I think is one that I think would be not too complex or not one of his more longer films. It's not a very massively long film, and I think that's exactly what I got for the most part. There is a bit of a plot in terms of the names of the gangs and everything. It's a bit like trying to wrap my head around it, but for the most part, I got around the plot. And personally, I don't know. I think I might have preferred this as I said in my review here. I may have preferred this over A Fistful of Dollars because of a couple of things. I think for one thing, I think the main character was really good because the main character I think is a really great protagonist in terms of his intelligence. I think what's interesting about Yojimbo is that even though he's a hired assassin, but he is someone who doesn't often pull out his sword as much as you might think, but it's there to, but like whenever he does, he's incredibly skilled with it. He'll swipe up the enemy and then bam, they're gone instantly almost. And I mentioned the cinematography as well, which I think is what boosted this to 4 stars for me because immediately when I was watching it, and the camera work I thought was like, wow, okay, yeah, this is a master at the helm. Obviously, credit should be given to the DOP, but Kurosawa obviously directed the film, so I think for Kurosawa, he should be definitely one of the things about Yojimbo that stood out for me quickly was the camera work, and also the opening was really good because I liked how the main character in Yojimbo, who his name is Sanjuro, who actually is the star of the sequel film. There's a sequel to this called Sanjuro, which is in the box that I've got. But Sanjuro as a protagonist, I like that in the opening he doesn't speak much. He like the start of the film is you're behind his back and he doesn't really speak at all. Bit similar to actually Indiana Jones, I suppose, where Indiana Jones in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones film, you see his back and you don't see his face fully revealed until later on in Raiders of the Lost Ark during the opening. and it makes sense, I suppose, for that because Spielberg and George Lucas, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, who are the creators of Indiana Jones, were are big fans of Kurosawa, as is many famous directors as well, who obviously were heavily influenced by his work. I do have a review that I need to write on Letterboxd for Nosferatu, but I can share my kind of thoughts on it. The reason I haven't done like a review just yet is only because, um, and sorry, it's my background's got some stuff floating. I just noticed. But the reason as to why I haven't rated Nosferatu as the film just yet, it's only because I want to give it a little thought about it. I had to think about it, but. The film I saw yesterday in IMAX was Nosferatu, which was a bit of a surprise that I was seeing it in IMAX because it's a horror film, but I was covering my ears a couple of times. But seeing it in IMAX, I have to say, was an absolute treat for me. Because seeing it in IMAX, was really something special. And I think that's the thing about the film. I thought it was a really well crafted horror film. If you're not too familiar with what Nosferatu is, it's a 2024 film that is a remake of a film that originally was in 1922. So it's one of those films that's now over 100 years old, and it's seen as the oldest surviving film of that's adapting Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, originally with Nosferatu, the original Nosferatu, the characters were changed, and it was basically changed the setting because with the story they couldn't use the characters, they weren't given the license, the rights to be able to use the story of Dracula. It was without the permission of Bram Stoker's widow, Bram Stoker, and because of when the film did come out, Bram Stoker's widow basically sued the basically went into a court case, I believe, or something like that, where essentially what resulted was that all copies of Nosferatu, the original, had to be um, destroyed. Um, but in the end, that of course didn't happen. The thing is with that is that it was not destroyed in the end, and uh, the thing is, though, it was found, and it was like I think I'm not sure exactly how, but it was there were still surviving versions of it, and so it managed to still be here, and it's seen as one of those classic horror films, real classic horror films in terms of like it's from 1922, and the imagery still is very, very striking. Like it's got the famous image clip of Count Orlok, who's Dracula going up the stairs, is shadow you can see just going up the stairs. The use of shadows and lighting is all very good. And then you also have uh and also the director of the remake has said thanks to SpongeBob because there's been talks about how me and I suppose a lot of generations were introduced to Nosferatu because of an episode of SpongeBob where at the end it's revealed that the lights are flickering in the Krusty Krab because of Nosferatu Count Orlok. So that's quite funny to see that. And it's funny seeing the director just thanking the SpongeBob for introducing the film to new audiences. And that the original 1922 version is quite famous, but there's also a version that was made back in, I think I'll just search up. It may have been in the 70s, which was directed by Werner Herzog and starred Klaus Kinski. I think Klaus Kinski was it. He was a very difficult actor to work with, and I think Werner Herzog was the only person who's worked with him twice. So that's a bit of an interesting little fact there. Reason being for Klaus Kinski is he was a very, I suppose, had a big temper, and just yeah, wasn't very maybe easy to work with. But the remake of Nosferatu the Vampire, was made in 1979, and then there's also a another film that came out called Shadow the Vampire from 2000, which has Willem Dafoe and John Malkovich, and it's basically about the making of Nosferatu, where essentially Willem Dafoe is playing Max Schreck, who was the original actor for Nosferatu, and basically is believing that he's a vampire. And what's funny about that as well is that Willem Dafoe is in this recent remake of Nosferatu, and it came out in 2024 on Christmas Day in America, but in the UK we got it on New Year's Day, and it was yesterday I saw it in the IMAX. And funny enough, Louis, who I mentioned before, who would was watching The Wild Robot with me. was actually I messaged him about I'd seen in IMAX Nosferatu, and then he messaged me back immediately after saying that he was seeing it 20 minutes in 20 minutes time. So that was a bit of a funny coincidence. And in terms of the film, seeing it in IMAX, I think was, even though I was covering my ears a number of times, it was just visually wise, it was a treat seeing in IMAX because the visuals and the production is absolutely beautiful. It cost about $50 million, but I think it would have been like you almost could think it's 100 million or something. It's just really stunning to look into. And thankfully, the film has actually done pretty all right. It's, I think, been Edgar's most successful film. It made about 100 million. So it's, I think, going to make back its profit in the end, just about because 100, it needs to make double 50 million to break even. So it's made about 100 million. So for me personally, I thought it was really, really striking. The imagery and everything, and the acting overall across the ball is incredible. And actually, when people talking about Count Orlok, who's been hidden away in the marketing, although the internet has kind of memed already what he looks like. But with the new Count Orlok, Dracula, people were talking about the look of him being terrifying. But I think what also adds to the terrifying factor, and also adds to like how you can't tell that it's Bill Skarsgård playing that role, is the voice, and the voice is booming across the IMAX like speakers and everything, which is really, really adds that fear factor as well. And you just feel like you're not really seeing the actor, you're just viewing the character with Count Orlok. But all the other cast are also equally terrific. Lily Rose Depp is, I think, really amazing in the film. And if the Oscars were more appreciative of horror films, they would definitely have give it. They probably would definitely give a Best Actor nomination to Lily Rose Depp. The rest of the cast is also great. You have Aaron Taylor Johnson being great as well as Nicholas Hoult, who's the husband, Thomas, who's the husband of Lily Rose Depp's character. And then Aaron Taylor Johnson is friends with them, and he has a wife played by Emma Corrin, and they're both really solid in the film. They're really great, as is Willem Dafoe, who plays essentially the Van Helsing type character in this film, and he's terrific. And it's great always to see, obviously, that Robert Edgers still works with Willem Dafoe, and it's nice also that Nosferatu has done well because Edgar's last film, which I haven't seen, The Northman, unfortunately didn't do very well. It was a bit of a bit of a flop. But thankfully this one's doing better, and I'm be glad to see The Northman. And I think if I was to watch The Northman, I don't know if it will change my opinion, but the thing about Nosferatu for me is that even though people will see the imagery and see what goes on in the film and think of it as very disturbing and like really quite graphic and quite disturbing. I think what will surprise people is just how the film, for me anyways, isn't um is one of Robert it might be Robert Edgers' most accessible film. It's one of his least strange films. If you think Nosferatu is strange, just wait until you see like The Lighthouse. That's a really strange film, which is really great, but it's also one of those films where I think that's more left up to your own mind. Whereas something like Nosferatu has a more clear-cut story, so it feels more like very much so that it feels more very much something that most audiences can and more audiences would be able to enjoy. Obviously, if you don't like horror, this is not for you. And it's a bit of a different take on Dracula because this is, I think, also in the original. That one of the things that I know is in the original story of Dracula from Bram Stoker is Dracula de-aging as the story progresses, but that doesn't happen here. However, it still very much takes the idea of Dracula, and in the credits it does say about being based on Nosferatu, and also being based on Bram Stoker's Dracula because it is a different. And so it provides a different take on Dracula, but as well as the production being great, what I liked seeing in IMAX as well was the transitions from different locations and transitioning from one scene to the other was all really, really beautiful to look at. So for me, I was just really, it was struck by the visuals and the performances and everything. It's probably about four or maybe four and a half, I think. It was generally a really, really great horror film that has jump scares in it, but not as much as I expected. It's actually got a lot of imagery that just lingers onto you and builds up, and it's there to disturb you, which is really terrific, though. And yeah, the film was just, I thought, a real treat to watch. And so, for me personally, I'll go and put on my full review of Nosferatu, but for my spoken review, that is what my thoughts are on Nosferatu. I've got a lot to say. It's a lot to pack in with that film, but I think everything about it was terrific. The production, the location work is all really lovely. It's all a beautifully looking film, surprisingly, for a film that's also got a lot of disturbing visuals, as well as also just having telling the story really well. I think it's about 2 hours or something, but I think the pacing was also a really good factor into it. I think it was never felt like it was going to drag out. I think it had a right sort of amount of pacing to it, and also with the production, you get these real animals as well throughout, like wolves and rats and everything, which is also really terrific. But yeah, no, I personally think it's really great. If you're a fan of Dracula or Nosferatu, I definitely would recommend this. And actually, seeing in IMAX is a real treat, I think. If you get the opportunity and you don't mind being scared a little bit, I think you'll really dig Nosferatu. It's a really terrific film that doesn't just rely on jump scares, which I appreciated as well. I think that's what Edgar's does quite well, is that he doesn't just rely on making audiences jump. He generally wants to create imagery that really sticks in your mind from something like The Witch or The Lighthouse and everything. And it's funny about The Witch because I don't know if Ralph Ineson is in the Northman, but he's in The Witch and he returns here in Nosferatu, playing a substantial role as well. And I think he was terrific in that film as well. So yeah, yeah, really great stuff. Nosferatu, I definitely recommend. Really, really good film. Um, but now I wanted to talk a bit about I'm gonna move away my I'm gonna go on to a bit of Big Finish as well, talking about some of the uh Big Finish .com sort of thing. Um so I'm gonna log in as well into my account to go ahead and set up some of the reviews that I've got to talk about with Big Finish. I've got several actually to talk about, to be honest, in terms of the Big Finish reviews. Oh, sorry, I got to enter my pin. But so there's a couple of ones I want to talk about. I was going to think about when. So I think for the very last one I'm going to be talking about, it will be this very special one. But the first ones I'm going to mention are more so little ones. So first one I want to talk about is a story that's part of a box set, but it's a box set that isn't really necessarily completely connected in telling an ongoing narrative. It's a box set that's connected more so by an ongoing theme. So back in 2015, mid of the 20 in 2015, the revival of Doctor Who was celebrating its 10-year anniversary, and with that 10-year. When Doctor Who was in the revival was turning 10 years old, which now is turning 10 years old, I just realizing, which is really bizarre to think about. I can't really believe really that. But yes, the 2015 was when the Doctor in the Revival turned about 10 years old. And for the 10 year, during that, when it did turn in 2015, Big Finish were able to acquire the license to tell stories set within the new series, as it's called, where Doctor Who is, where they were able to go ahead and start telling stories set within the revival, and they've told, and as soon as they nabbed that up, they quickly started eventually getting round to telling various different stories set within the revival in interesting ways. There is the Destiny of the Doctor range, which is for the 50th, but that was Big Finish, I think, collaborating with BBC Books. If we're talking strictly Big Finish, their first real sort of thing they released was the Unit box set, Unit Extinction, which told the Unit stories set within the modern day and focused on the unit team that is seen today, or rather during the Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi time, where you had Gemma Redgrave as Kate Stewart and Ingrid Oliver as Osgood. And then they moved on to the War Doctor box set as well as the Diary of River Song, which was in like late 2015, where the Diary of River Song was the start of a very long range where it was telling where the River Song usually encounters a Doctor from the classic era, and there's probably some sort of explanation surrounding it. They also did do a box set on Winston Churchill, who was in the Matt Smith era, which is a very unique sort of take. But the one I want to take a look at is one that was released in 2016, July 2016 to be exact, known as Classic Doctor's New Monsters, where it's a very accessible release, and it's one that the Big Finish have put on like BBC Sounds, for instance, to listen to free, because it's a very accessible and easy way to jump into into the sort of classic era of Doctor Who in a way where it has the pacing of the modern series with 1 hour episodes, 45 to 1 hour episodes, and it also focuses on a monster that's in the revival. And The first volume box set contains four stories featuring four doctors, in this case, the fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth Doctor. And as the title implies, they are facing off against monsters set within the revival. I've listened to one of them, Fallen Angels, which I'm probably going to listen to again to maybe do a review on it, which was written by Phil Morine. But the one I'm going to take a look at is the Sixth Doctor's one. I recently actually started finishing the Sixth Doctor's era. I'm actually on the Seventh Doctor's era. I'm on season 26, which is very, very exciting, and is a very, very great and should be a very, very exciting uh, uh, season to take a look into. It's one that I've been looking forward to taking a look into for a while. But the Sixth Doctor's era, I went ahead and I watched all the way through. And whilst it was nice to go ahead and watch the Sixth Doctor's era, my main excitement was it meant that now that I've done with the Sixth Doctor on television, I'm going to go ahead and now take a look at his work on Big Finish because one of the main praise regarding the Sixth Doctor is his Big Finish audios. I actually met Colin Baker as well, by the way. Very, very exciting. That was at London Comic Con. But in terms of the Sixth Doctor on Big Finish, I've listened to a couple of stories with the Sixth Doctor. One of them being the this one in the box set, in which was Jadoon in Chains, written by two writers, Simon Barnard and Paul Morris. And with Jadoon in Chains, um, Jadoon in Chains, I listened to in an interesting way. It wasn't via the app or the purchase that I had. It was via it was listening to basically a podcast that Big Finish have done recently called Into the TARDIS, which is a podcast they've been doing for, I'd say, about a year now. And it's a podcast that, funny enough, is hosted by Colin Baker, who plays the Sixth Doctor. But the Into the TARDIS podcast is basically another way for Big Finish to get people to listen to Big Finish. It's a podcast that allows for people to take a listen to Big Finish and get started into listening to Big Finish. Where usually, if even for an hour long episode, they go ahead and they cut them to like two parts, and that's what happened with Jadoon in Chains, where it was a two-part kind of two episodes of this podcast, where Colin Baker is introducing the story, and then as the story gets introduced, the story then is shown, or rather listened to by the viewer. And halfway through the story, it cut, and then they ended part one, and then part two came around, which I listened to, um, and so I went ahead and listened to that kind of structure with it. And Jadoon in Chains was probably the first one I listened to from this podcast. I know after the episode as well, they have a little bit of behind the scenes as well, where they talk a bit about it. And just got my knees a bit. Um, but Colin Baker, as you can see, he's hosting it, and he talked about the story, saying as well, Old Sixty, mentioning that that's the nickname he's fondly given the character that he plays, as well as the fans. And you also had and you also had as well as that, you also had the Colin Baker talking about the behind the scenes and saying that he probably doesn't remember a whole lot about the story, maybe perhaps in terms of behind the scenes, but he says the behind the scenes there will help introduce it to it'll help to recap the story and talk about the making of the story. But Jadoon in Chains, talking about this story, so what Jadoon in Chains is about is essentially it starts out in a funny enough way. It starts out in a crime scene is happening. So essentially, well, it's not a crime scene; it's a court case. It's a crime that a Jadoon is being accused of. This Jadoon being called Captain Kaibo, who is voiced here by Nicholas Briggs, who voices all the Jadoons here. And what happens with Captain Kaibo is he's accused of the crime of basically he defected from his troop and essentially he ran away and he gets found by the Jadoon and he's put in a court in England, I believe, in that time period. And what happens is the Sixth Doctor comes in and is basically representing and trying to defend the character of the Jadoon. And basically, as the plot synopsis says here, the Sixth Doctor is no stranger to courtroom drama, but faces a very different challenge when he prepares to defend a most unusual Jadoon. After an environmental clearance mission goes wrong, Captain Kaibo of the 19th Jadoon Interplanetary Force is stranded in Victorian England, bound in chains, and exhibit in a circus show. But he has allies: Eliza Jenkins, known to audiences as Thomasina Thumb, a larger-than-life clown in the colourful coat. Uncovering a trail of injustice and corruption, the Doctor and Kaibo soon found themselves on trial for their lives. So essentially, yeah, that's as it says, that he's no stranger to courtroom drama, because that's one of the fun things about it, because the Sixth Doctor being on trial makes a lot of sense. And actually, I'm going to play now a clip of the Sixth Doctor dealing with the courtroom drama in Jadoon in Chains.
All rise. This court is now back in session. Justice Burrows presiding.
So, Commander, ready for battle?
Battle?
Intellectual battle, I mean. Well, I've enjoyed the odd judicial spar before, but never with a Jadoon. With your reputation as legal heavyweights, I'm rather looking forward to it. Now then.
You may be seated. I'm afraid it appears we have no choice but to proceed. Would the prosecution please open by making their case against... Are we keeping you, Doctor?
Sorry?
Your fob watch. You seem to find it particularly fascinating.
Apologies, Your Honour. Just reflecting on certain matters. O tempora, o mores, tempus fugit, and such forth. Please, carry on.
The case is clear. Captain Kaibo deserted his post without authorization. He stole a craft and left Jadoon space without authorization. He was pursued to Earth and recaptured.
Pursued to Earth. I see. Captain Kaibo, I must ask you to enter a plea. Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
I cannot deny what the commander says. The accused pleads guilty, sentence is death.
Wait!
Explain this interruption.
You haven't heard the defence yet. You must abide by local due process, remember? As my old friend Ambrose so elegantly put it, si fueres Romae, Romano vivito more.
Counsel for the defence will kindly refrain from further Latin tags. This is Reigate and Banstead, not the Old Bailey.
My apologies, Your Honour. I call my first witness, Captain Kaibo.
So that's kind of the opening surrounding it and how it opens up. It opens up in the courtroom, and what happens during a lot of the story is kind of being told back. Kind of like Trial of a Time Lord, where you have the Doctor and Captain Kaibo are talking, or rather Captain Kaibo might be talking about the story and telling what happens. And what I think is, and I think for this story, whilst I don't maybe absolutely adore it, I think it was a really good story. I thought it was a really solid story that I thought was perhaps better than Fallen Angels, which I will listen to again, but I think for me this was the better overall kind of story. I think for me, Jadoon in Chains was a really solid Sixth Doctor audio, and I think what I liked about it, for me anyways, was just that the Sixth Doctor, he's presented as a lot more kinder in this. And that's what often happens with his Big Finish audience. And that's where a lot of the praise comes through, where the Sixth Doctor's kind of, I suppose, nastiness was taken away, which I liked when I first was seeing it. But I think as the time went on, it did become a bit kind of repetitive, boring, and perhaps a bit harsh. And it takes away from, I suppose, the joy that you're supposed to maybe feel with Doctor Who. But thankfully, with the Sixth Doctor here, he's a lot more kinder, a lot more nicer in this in this in this in this in this audio. And that part of that kindness also comes from not just him helping the Jadoon, but he also, as mentioned, there's a character called Eliza who's voiced really nicely by I'm trying to see if I can know what her character who voices her, but it's Karuno Stamo. I'm not sure if I said that right, but basically she's a really nice character in this audio as well, where she kind of befriends the Jadoon Captain Kaibo, that's also one of the main sort of, I suppose, highlights surrounding it, is Captain Kaibo himself as a Jadoon that's given so much more personality, and it shows you that there is depth to be had with these characters that are essentially very simple-minded characters, and therefore very not much dimension is often given to them. They're a squad of police bounty hunters. But here in Jadoon in Chains, they are actually given a great amount of depth to them. I have a Jadoon figure actually, funny enough, up somewhere up there. And the character of Captain Kaibo is a really terrific character. The captain, and I think it's with him and the Sixth Doctor's character and how he's presented here that helps to make it really nice. And I think also it can provide a nice introduction to the Sixth Doctor and Big Finish, giving you sort of an idea as to, right, this is how the Sixth Doctor is often presented with Big Finish. This is how he's often written, where he might have a bit of ego to him, but he's a lot more mellowed out here. And he's often someone that I think Colin Baker summarizes as being one to fight for justice. And that's definitely true here. He's someone who would fight for someone's cause. And that's definitely represented here. And with Captain Kaiba as well, it's very much I remember Stu Bagful did a review of this box set, and he talked about it being basically inspired by The Elephant Man, which I haven't seen, but is a very famous film from David Lynch, which is of course about a man who is put in a circus. He has a disfigurement, and much like that, Captain Kaibo is put through a circus in Victorian England. He's kind of almost tricked in a way to basically by the circus master being trying to be nice to him, but in the end, he's actually just really using him. And with Captain Kaibo, not to give too much away, but is, as I said, given a lot more depth and dimension. And for me personally, I thought it was a really solid audio. Maybe it's not one I absolutely loved, but it was one that I definitely enjoyed. Personally, more than say Fallen Angels, and I think it was really solid. I think part of the dimension and added depth to the Jadoon was also another thing that I really liked about it, where he just was giving more depth to this character. And for me, I think that's the main factor into why I overall pretty enjoyed it. And it was nice actually listening to Into the TARDIS, because I think having it split into two episodes, that means cutting it down even more a little bit. And I think perhaps can make it more accessible, even more so, to the listeners who haven't listened to Big Finish. And if you do have a podcast like Spotify or Apple Podcast, you can listen to it on there. There's also episodes for free on Spotify and Apple Music as well from early Big Finish. But I think if we're talking for maybe hour-long sort of episodes and everything, and the structure of Into the TARDIS, that I think can be very accessible to new listeners. I don't know how many people listen to it, but it's a nice podcast that I will probably be listening to. Even if I have some of the box sets, it'll be nice to maybe just give a listen to how they do these sort of things. And it'll be just nice to hear maybe Colin Baker introduce some stories as well. So yeah, pretty nice overall story, I thought. I definitely would say that you can give that a listen to. If you like that, I think they also have the other episodes of classic Doctor's New Monsters. And if you overall like most of the stories a lot, then just pick up maybe the full box set and then see where it takes you there for a Big Finish. Um, got a little TARDIS t-shirt as well for my Doctor Who reviews. But so after that review, I thought I'd take a look at another Big Finish audio, and it's one that I actually own myself. I'm going to go ahead and just get the find the box set here on the website, and I'm also going to get the actual box set. I'll explain as to why I have the actual physical CD copy of this audio. So I'll just be back in a moment. I'm just going to quickly get it. Oh. All right. Okay. So you're probably notice, of course, by the during this episode, I have something in the background, which I had in my Zagreus review, which was the Eighth Doctor's TARDIS. However, this one is not that. Instead, I'm just seeing all this flowy stuff around, but instead it's the 12th Doctor's TARDIS. Not because he's probably my favorite incarnation of the Doctor, but because I am actually reviewing a 12th Doctor audio. Specifically, it's this one, known as Time Jacked, which is part of the Doctor Chronicles. So a little bit of a background surrounding the Doctor Chronicles. This started, I'm not too sure, but this started, I'm going to take a look and see when it actually started, the Doctor Chronicles. But to give you the premise as to what the Doctor Chronicles is, essentially these started out as box sets where they were able to tell stories featuring the modern Doctors, but without using the actors who actually play the Doctors. So you have the ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th Doctors basically going ahead and it's telling stories with these incarnations, but it's just without these actors. So, for instance, the Ninth Doctor Chronicles was the first one, released back in May of 2017, which strangely feels like a lifetime ago. And this was before Christopher Eccleston came on board to do Big Finish audios. And you basically had stories where you had, for instance, Camille Coduri playing Jackie Tyler, who would tell these stories, or you had Nicholas Briggs telling these stories as well. And you had like maybe a companion telling a story with the Ninth Doctor, or perhaps Nicholas Briggs comes on board. The same then applied to the 10th Doctor Chronicles as well, where you had Michelle Ryan playing Lady Christina again, as well as Jacqueline King returning as Sylvia, Donna's mother. And then you had ones, of course, featuring the 11th and 12th Doctors. And most of these were stories that had mostly narration and not full-blown casts. But it started to change, I think, during the 11th Doctor Chronicles Volume 2, where you had these very different type of stories, where you had various different stories where you had Jacob Dudman doing the voice of the 11th Doctor. And Jacob Dudman, for those of you who don't know, is a really gifted impressionist. He's an actor as well, and I first came across him, though, via his YouTube channel, where he's done impressions of various different doctors, the 11th Doctor being his most popular in my introduction to him, where he does an incredible impression of Matt Smith. But he's also done good impressions for other doctors, including, of course, Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, where in this box set, Volume 2, Time Jacked, this isn't connected to Volume 1. Volume 1 basically tells essentially various different 12th Doctor stories that aren't necessarily connected, just a box set containing different 12th Doctor stories, and it features ones that feature, for instance, Osgood, played by Ingrid Oliver again, and Samuel Anderson, who returns as Danny Pink. See, 4 stories from the 12th Doctor's era, and it's got Jacob Dudman narrating it, who probably does an impression of the 12th Doctor. He's done an impression for the 12th Doctor in this box set as well, Time Jacked. However, the difference between Volume 1 and 2 is that this one tells an ongoing kind of narrative. It's basically a full cast box set, where instead, though, of Peter Capaldi, you have Dudman, Jacob Dudman, playing the 12th Doctor, accompanied by a brand new companion that we never heard or saw before. And this companion is known simply as Kira Sandstorm, played by Bavanisha Palmer, who actually had appeared in Doctor Who before. She actually appeared in the Jodie Whittaker era, the 13th Doctor's era, as Yaz's sister, Yasmin Khan's sister, companion Yasmin Khan. But here she plays a different character. She plays Kira Sandstorm, who basically is a time agent, or at least a time agent rookie. And what she basically has is she's caused a bit of an issue on a planet known, simply put, where it's a planet known as, I'm going to see if I can find it, Calandra, where she basically needs to go ahead and get back to Calandra because she's basically was stuck in sort of near modern day, and she needs to get like some sort of way to get back to Calandra. And so basically what she does is, of course, get the Doctor, because the Doctor, of course, has a ship known as the TARDIS, which she needs to use. And she basically, as the title implies, time jacks, in a way, kidnaps the Doctor, who is at this point being a teacher at the university that he teaches during Series 10. This takes place in between. This takes place, I would say, after the return of Doctor Mysterio, but before the pilot, where it's before he meets Bill Potts, but he's lecturing at the university, guarding the vault, and he, of course, has to and he's got Nardole with him as well, who is mentioned in the box set, but is not actually doesn't speak or say anything. And in this box set, as the title implies, rookie agent Kira Sandstorm needs the Doctor's help, and she's prepared to go to extreme measures to get it. Unwillingly whisked away from St. Luke's University, the Doctor quickly discovers that being forced off Earth is only the start of his problems. And that's probably as best as I can say in terms of giving it away. I'll play a little clip, actually, from Flight to Calandra, where the Doctor and Kira have arrived there. And I will play a clip and which will give you an idea as to what this box set is all about.
Why build all this if nobody's going to use it?
It wasn't like this when I left. There were people. Everywhere.
Maybe they abandoned the planet. Imminent disaster, moon on a collision course. It's happened before, in lots of places. Sometimes it wasn't even my fault.
I guess it's possible. Maybe they just wiped themselves out. It's not down to me either. No way.
You're not from Calandra at all, are you?
I never said I was.
You haven't said much. I think, Kira Sandstrom, if that is your name, you should start...
Of course it's my name. Why wouldn't it be my name?
Oh, just a sense of general untrustworthiness you exude. Now, why would that be? Ah, yes, armed kidnapping. Anyway, whoever you are, you should start by telling me what you were doing here before.
I do not answer to...
What's going on over there?
See the sign? Transit Station 9, public transport system.
Doesn't look like a very pleasant commute. Come on, let's catch the 8 train.
So that is the plot synopsis. So that's basically gives you an idea as to what this box set has, and that's the first story. But also with these stories as well, what's great about this box set actually is it's got a lot of variety. These box sets have a connection, but also at the same time they tell an ongoing story. But they also have each of the stories are written by. So Matt Fitton writes the first one, and then Lou Morgan writes the other two. And with these stories, they all have a different kind of feel to them. The first one is kind of your setting up, entering sort of one location. The doctor's there, has to save the day in a way. The second one is more of a without giving anything away. And to be fair, Split Second doesn't have a lot to in terms of plot description from Big Finish. I can actually read out the description here on the little booklet that they have in the box set, where it says the plot synopsis to it was, "Oh dear, that wasn't meant to happen," which I won't say what happens, of course, but with this second story, it's very much an adventure hopping kind of story. And then the third one kind of brings in sort of a more dramatic big twist that happens at the end of the second part that then comes into this the third story where also the plot is all completely revealed. And one of the things I liked about this box set, the main thing I would say, is that it's a very fun story, but what is also good, and I think what makes a great sort of fun Big Finish audio and anything kind of fun, is that there's not just fun and therefore it's not got much to say or do or anything. It has a bit of substance to it, actually. It has a great and that substance comes from Kira Sandstorm. I think Benicia Palmer is a terrific character, and with Dudman provides really great chemistry with each other. She provides a different type of companion to the 12th Doctor, and the 12th Doctor himself is written, I think, really well. And mixed that with Dudman's really solid impression, I'm able to just enjoy the story and not really be distracted at all by, it not being actually Peter Capaldi. And with the story as well, I think with Kira Sandstrom, she's this character who undergoes a journey and an arc where she does become better as the story progresses. And I think also the Doctor kind of realizes he may have misjudged her. And that I think adds to a lot of the adds to what makes Time Jack, I think, a really great actually box set, which I think surprised me. I went into this hoping that this would be good, but I didn't know if I was expecting it to be actually really, really solid and having perhaps more than perhaps I was thinking it would add. But it actually was a really great story, I thought. And I think I won't give away much of the plot because there is a number of twists going around. But overall, I just think it was a really solid box set. Personally, for me, I think, and the reason I bought it actually physically on CD was because of the second box set more so, which is volume 3, You Only Die Twice, which the thing about this box set is that a friend of mine actually wrote one of the stories on that box set, and I'm very eager to now actually dive into it. I said I was thinking in my head, I'll listen to that one fully once I've listened and reviewed this box set. And for me personally, yeah, I really liked it. You'll notice on the cover art, if I share it on Big Finish's website as well, that there's a lot of various exciting imagery, which involves stuff like, for instance, knights and dinosaurs and robots. It all makes sense in the story because the time jack element isn't just the Doctor being kidnapped. It also, I think, comes from how time is being messed about here, which in a way makes sense for this era, which is written by Stephen Moffat, and so it involves a bit of a timey-wimey feel to it. But yeah, I think if I was actually to compare it to the era, it's probably something like Flatline or Mummy and the Orient Express. The stories that from the 12th Doctor's era are written well and are mostly very exciting, fun stories that you can just have a great time with. Not ones that are trying to be like the dark, emotional ones like Heaven Sent, for instance, which is a very different type of script. But yeah, this one I personally had a really solid time with, and I think a lot of people, I don't know how many people perhaps would go into this thinking this would be amazing or anything, but I think with this box set, I think they did a really good job in being able to provide a different type of story for the 12th Doctor era, but it also feels in a way faithful to the 12th Doctor's era, and it just is a nice addition to the to this. And yeah, I actually thought this was a really solid box set. And the thing is, as well, is that there's in between this box set and then You Only Die Twice, which was the second, which is the volume three of the 12th Doctor's Chronicles. There is an entire series written about the 11th Doctor where he's got a new companion as well. And I also bought physical copies of that. And I will review those, but in separate videos because I've heard a lot of praise surrounding that series, which I think surprised me and I think has surprised a lot of people. But yeah, I will definitely be taking a look at that range as well, which, funny enough, was produced by Alfie Shaw, who I believe is the producer of this range, this 12th Doctor Chronicles. And I just thought, if Alfie Shaw's done a really good job with the 12th Doctor Chronicles, and there's a lot of praise surrounding the 11th Doctor Chronicles, I'm more than excited now to check out what he does with the incarnation before Peter Capaldi. And yeah, I thought with this audio, personally time jacked, I thought was a really nice story. And as I said, it had a more substance to it. It wasn't just fun. It had a really good character journey for Kira Sandstorm, which made her Kira Sandstrom, which was a really great character, I thought. And I think Benicia Palmer is a really terrific character that goes toe to toe with Dudman. And the stories are varied as well, which adds to the stories are all connected, but they also have a bit of variety to them, which makes them also pretty darn great. So yeah, really cool stuff. I mean, it has also the best costume of the 12th Doctor, which is his you can see a little bit of it, but if I share, yeah, I mean, if I share the screen, you can see it. But it's got his best costume in my opinion, which is his Heaven Sent red velvety costume, which is just the best costume of the 12th Doctor, personally. I mean, that costume for me is peak 12th Doctor costume. Like, it's the one that I probably would want to cosplay with 12th Doctor. Yeah, that beautiful coat. It's lovely. Very Pertwee-esque. But yeah, so that was the 12th Doctor Chronicles time jacked. And actually, I'm going to probably now talk about the next audio, and it's the one that I saved for last. Now, I have everything except for a poster which I got from this Big Finish audio. And the reason, oh dear, my microphone's my microphone's too giddy with excitement or something like that. It's just fallen off. Um, but talking about the Big Finish audio, so I did buy this from the. I bought this poster, which I don't have now. I don't know where it is. I'll find it. But I also bought a couple other things as well during this Big Finish audio. And the reason why it was more than just like the actual audio itself was because this was a very special release. This release was basically to celebrate 25 years of Big Finish audios. And their way of celebrating it was via something that wasn't as big as maybe their 20th celebration, which was this massive box set they did called The Legacy of Time, but still a very nice release. That was given a very special kind of occasion where essentially what they did is they basically got a entire stage in London, in this case Camden Hall, I believe it was, where they basically got an entire stage to go ahead and tell an entire story centered on a particular doctor who was associated with Big Finish very often, and it's one that I've also reviewed a lot of his audios on. And usually I would do kind of an own separate video talking about the Eighth Doctor audios, but with this audio, I'll make an exception because I want to talk about just the various different or the various special things surrounding this audio and just talking about what the event was like. So this is the Stuff of Legend, which is the name. So this is what it is. It's the Stuff of Legend, a very special release from Big Finish that was there to celebrate, as I said, 25 years. That tells a very fun release with the Eighth Doctor. You'll also notice that he's traveling with companion India Fisher, who plays Charlie Pollard, his very first companion, who is a fan favorite and one that I've listened to quite a bit of. And I'm just taking a look as well on my phone to see when I went to this event. So I went to this event in the 15th of September. It was in September time. They were basically going ahead and allowing people to go and listen to this on a live version of this. It says studio version here because there was a live version that has been released recently from Big Finish, where it was the live showing takes various different days during the live event and meshes it together to basically go ahead and like get you to listen to the live showing, whether you've actually listened to the live showing. You actually went there live, like me, or you went ahead and you're listening to it just because you want to check out what it was like as a live event. But it was a really exciting live event, and with that, I actually got this CD of the Stuff of Legend. And also, there's a Doctor magazine I bought before I went to the event. It was on the day, and it actually has a bit on Nicholas Briggs talking about. There was a bit on the Doctor Who proms, and then there was a bit here where Nicholas Briggs, in a section, is actually talking about the Stuff of Legend. It's there talking about the Stuff of Legend. Nicholas Briggs, who's like one of the heads of Big Finish and voices the Daleks, and yeah, just talking about that. So it was on the 14th and 15th of September, and it was a really great event. There was a lot of fans going to it, and I also bought this program here with the Stuff of Legend, which is really cool. Has a lot of things about the various people who worked on it, the various cast as well. So yeah, really, really awesome stuff. And in terms of the overall packaging, it was really cool. But the actual story, the actual audio, what do I think of it? Well, I listened to the live version and it was good, but I also wanted to listen to the studio version, the actual version when I bought it, just because I wanted to get a better gist around the plot and everything and, shut my eyes, which I usually do, and just imagine the story, immerse myself in it. Whereas the live event, though, was a very fun opportunity, though. That was fun because you got to just get the opportunity to see kind of how Big Finish would do a kind of audio, but just in a live sort of environment. But actually talking about the Stuff of Legend, the story basically sees the Eighth Doctor and Charlie land in Cornwall, where they have to go ahead, where they eventually start investigating some creature called the Bucker, which is like this legendary creature. And as the plot says here, something is afoot in the lonely Cornish village of Merrymaid Bay. Rumours of dead men working in the tin mines have sent a chill through the community, and it's up to the Doctor and Charlie to get to the bottom of the mystery. Can the legends of the Bucker that haunt the mines be true? And what awesome power do the Doctor's greatest enemy, the Daleks, threaten to unleash upon the universe? So yes, the Daleks are of course prominently featured here. You'll also notice that this different Dalek looks a bit like the Special Weapons Dalek. That's the Driller Dalek, which also leads into one of the best lines in the entire thing. And the actual thing itself, listening to it live, was really great. For the most part, the cast were reading out well, but there were moments where the cast had to read out the lines again. And Alex McQueen here, who basically, I'll explain who he played, had to say his lines a couple of times. And Nicholas Briggs, who voiced the Daleks, was saying, "Do you want me to exterminate him?" And that got a bit of a laugh out the audience. The whole thing did, in fact. And in terms of the actual story, I won't say too much, but I'm going to play a little bit of a clip that helps set up kind of what goes on during the story.
It began around midsummer. There was talk of corpse lights seen in the old Merrymaid mine.
Corpse lights, jack-o'-lanterns, will-o'-the-wisps, Ignis Fatuae.
That's right. And the pisky-led fool went looking. There's something down there, miss. And the professor woke it up. And now, we know no peace.
Oh, rubbish.
That's what we all thought. Until men started disappearing.
Disappearing how?
Well, if we knew that, there'd be no mystery. But there's fishing boats a-bobbing in the bay, which went out fully crewed in the morning and returned empty by nightfall. And sounds of digging from the mine. Now what's doing that digging, miss? 'Cause it sure ain't living men.
This is utterly fantastic.
Dead men working in the cane fields.
What was that, Captain?
Reminds me of tales I've heard from Haiti. Tales of zombies.
Zombies? Are you saying you believe in such things, Captain?
Believe? No. If there's any truth to the zombie myths, then they're victims of nerve poisons. Psychotropic compounds administered by evil men, so as to do their bidding.
Oh, it's evil, certainly. But it ain't being done by men.
Rubbish. There's always a rational explanation, if you dig deep enough.
Speaking of which, you heard digging this afternoon, didn't you, Charlie?
I'm not sure what I heard.
You see? This village is cursed, and there's nothing we can do.
So the little story there, it's the Eighth Doctor and Charlie start entering Cornwall, and they meet some of the characters and the cast in this. And overall, the cast I would say is really, really strong. There's not a massive amount of people, but it adds to I think the cast being really, really great. You have, of course, Paul McGann and India Fisher being great as the Doctor and Charlie, but you also have other characters as well. Like you have Barnaby Edwards, who's actually the director, I believe, of this audio, and he was also directing kind of the story during the live event. And I think he's the unsung hero of that live event. He had to direct it and voice multiple characters as well. So he was playing the Jago Penrose and Foley as well. Foley being this butler of this person that one of the characters, Emily specifically, is trying to find, Emily Barnfather. She basically travels to the Cornish village to meet up with this professor who has a butler called Foley. And then Jago Penrose is the owner of this like pub who has a very Cornish accent, and he's a real highlight as a fun character. And what's also great is he has a great dynamic with Captain Montgomery Caesar, voiced by Jason Forbes, who's also really great as well in the story, both in the live version and in the studio version. What's interesting though about the cast is that old Emily Barnfire, who also is basically she's an older version of the character of Emily, who plays a sort of companion in this story to the Eighth Doctor. Here she's in the story here. She's played by an actor you'll probably recognize from Tracy Beaker or Doctor Who, for instance. She was in Bad Wolf Plying of the Ways. She's played by Nish Nair through most of the story, but there's an older Emily who starts telling the story and is basically voiced by Annette Badland in the studio version. However, in the live version, that was a different actor who voiced her. The older actor was Caroline Seymour, who I think did a really good job as well. And funny enough, much like that as well, they both voiced the Bucker as well, Annette Badland and Caroline Seymour. Although Caroline plays the light Bucker because there's two different Buckers in the story. The Dark Bucker is voiced by I don't know who's voiced by. Just see if I can find it. The Bucker was voiced by the Dark Buck was voiced by Gabriel Clark, who I don't know if he's listed off in the cast here, but that was also he was solid here, and all the cast in the live version was great. It was really cool to see it, and if you notice on the images as the video clips they've shown of the live version, you also get Paul McGann in. You also get Paul McGann in full Eighth Doctor costume, which was really, really cool to see that. It was really great to see that, and he still has a great fit to that, and he clearly has a lot of. I think he still has the enthusiasm with the Eighth Doctor, which is really nice. And being that also I'm listening currently to the Eighth Doctor and Charlie audios, the original monthly range, it feels like very much like that, and it works quite well. And the chemistry between the Doctor and Charlie is still there. And it does work as a really nice, almost feeling like an early Eighth Doctor audio, which I think works, I suppose, to celebrate 25 years of Big Finish. And also with this story, what is also key as well is much like Time Jacked, this was a story that's meant to be very fun. It's meant to be something that's to please audiences, especially it being the idea that it's going to be presented live in front of the audience. And I think Robert Valentine did a really good job in providing something that's fun, but like Time Jack, there's the substance of the great mythology surrounding it, and also it's smart in the way that it has the different characters come into play, because you have the Daleks and then you have the Master, who is voiced by Alex McQueen, so that's who he plays. And with Alex McQueen's Master, and with the story as it goes along, the Daleks and the Master are all played really, really well. And with the I think my 12th Doctor video might have just stopped. Yes, it has. I will play it now. Oh, there's a bit of an ad going on, but essentially with the story, what I like as well is with the Daleks and the Master, it doesn't feel like it's jamming too many ideas or too many villains. You also have the Bucker as well, but it does feel like the story works. It's flowing really, really nicely, and the Daleks themselves are once again really solid as well. There's these Robo-Men in the story, which are like these zombie type characters, and I didn't realize until the story was playing that until I saw a video talk it's like behind the scenes on the live show where they talked about how the story is taking inspiration from Plague of Zombies, a Hammer House horror film, which feels fitting for Doctor Who to take inspiration from a Hammer House horror film. Um, And but I think even if you don't know that, it still can really work. It's just that the Robomen are acting like zombies, and they act like these undead men, which I think is another. Which listening to that as well was quite fun when you watched it on stage, where you get to have like that take place. And what's also fun is you get the Nicholas Briggs doing his actual work of the Daleks with the voice modulator, which ring modulator, which is really great as well. And I thought overall, listening to the studio version helped for me to unpack the story, and I thought it was a really well crafted story that I'd be glad to listen to time and time again if I want to pop in just a nice solid story that also feels accessible. I think if you haven't listened to the Eighth Doctor and Charlie and you want to, this is a really good story to listen to because it doesn't really fit with any part of the timeline. It's just them traveling together as it is. It's not really saying where exactly it's set. It's just them traveling together, and it provides a really nice overall story, I thought, for the characters of the Doctor and Charlie, and it gives you a great idea as to their dynamic, and it's just a fun story as well that could be accessible. You get like the Daleks, the Master, and speaking of him, I have to say he was one of the highlights in terms of the story. I think Alex McQueen's take on the Master was this delightfully cynical, charming type character. He's got the charm of Roger Delgado, but there's cynicism to him as well, which I think just made him a real highlight for me in this story. I think he was presented really well in this story, and he had a great dynamic with and he's just a really great character. I won't say too much as well as his dynamic with the Doctor, but that's also a great highlight. That's great to listen to as well. And overall, I think with the live showing, it was a really cool, exciting event. And then actually listening to it again on the studio version, it still was really great. And it's nice that actually I'm reviewing both that and Time Jack on this episode of the podcast, because they both are stories that kind of have a bit of a similarity, where they are both very fun stories that are fun, but they have a great substance and there's a bit added to it. It's not just sloppily produced or anything. It's actually generally really solid works, and ones that I'd be happy to re-listen to again. And as for the 12th Doctor one, I've got to move on to, of course, You Only Die Twice, which I'll definitely will, and I'm definitely looking forward to diving into those audios. So yeah, that's my review of the Stuff of Legend, and also a review of the other Big Finish audios. I've also shared thoughts on some of the movies I reviewed, and as I always say, for now, I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Chillaxing and Chit Chattin podcast. I hope you've had a good time listening to this or watching this. If you want to see more videos, I have more videos. You can subscribe if you want to see more uploads coming up, and also just dive into my channel to see what other video episodes I've done, and also other videos I've done. So yeah, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment as well, maybe on the video, see what you thought about it. And yeah, I think that's mostly what I've got to say, and I hope you've of course had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And all I'll say for now is remember to keep chillaxing, and always remember to chit chat. Thank you for watching.